Hey, welcome back to Business 101, Introduction to Business. We're continuing our look at the topic of organization and organizational structure in this, our module number 6. And here in this particular video lecture, we're looking at the topic of delegation. Delegation is really the principle that all of this about organization and specialization really rests upon. It is about being able to multiply an organization's efforts through the people and the chains of authority and command that are inherent in the whole process of specialization and departmentalization, which we've talked about in previous lectures. So what is delegation? Well, it's a process, and you can see here the three-step delegation process described. Delegation can be defined as how a manager allocates work to subordinates. And if you picture in your mind an organization chart, it's how a manager allocates the work of the entire work group to the folks who report to him in that org chart. How does it work? Well, you see the steps here. Number one, the manager assigns the responsibility to a specific worker or group of workers. What does that mean? It means you assign the duty to perform the assigned task. Step two, if you're going to assign the responsibility, you also have to grant the authority and the resources in order to complete the task. You see there, the power to make the decisions necessary to complete the task, and of course control over any necessary resources. And then step three, you create an accountability relationship revolving around the task. And that is the obligation employees have for the successful completion of the task. That is the three-step process of delegation. So let's talk a little bit about what this looks like in real life. If you're the manager and you have a qualified employee working for you in your chain of command, and you have a report that's due next week on Thursday, that would be like calling your employee in, hey Jim, you know we have this report due next week on Thursday. I'd like to assign it to you. Will you be able to complete it? Is that something you're able to do? It is? Great. Well, let me make sure that you have access to all of the resources, the data, everything you need in order to successfully complete it. Also, does your work schedule allow you to have that completed by Thursday next week? It does? Awesome. Okay, so you have that task assigned to you. You have all the decision-making power as well as access to the resources you need. Would you mind if I checked in with you the day before the report is due? That would be Wednesday of next week, so we can review your results before we publish it out to the rest of the organization. Does that sound good? Sounds doable? Awesome. Great. It's yours to do. Now, what does that really mean? It also means that between now and next week on Wednesday, when the two of you have agreed, you're going to see what the results look like before you publish it to the entire organization by the due date, that you're not hounding Jim every single day of the week. You're not checking in 2 days later. Hey, how's the report going? Hey, is the report going? Are you halfway done? Hey, how's it going? Can I take a look what you've got? Hey, how's it going? What's the font you're using? Right? You're doing none of those. In other words, what you are doing is you are trusting your qualified employee, given both the responsibility, a power, and the access to the resources, that he's going to be able to take care of it, and that you have already agreed when you're checking in. This sort of goes against the grain of an old adage in management, which unfortunately still lingers with us today, which is trust but verify. And so trust but verify is the kind of principle that says, okay, I've assigned it to him to do it. I've given him access to the resources. Let me just check tomorrow and make sure he really understands he's on it. And I'll check the day later to see what kind of progress. Trust but verify. Well, here's the thing. Trust but verify means you don't trust. And if you don't trust, you're micromanaging. You're not delegating. This is really the spirit of delegation is you are granting full authority and access to resources in exchange for the accountability. That means that when you've agreed that you're going to meet again on this, that things will be ready. I hope that makes sense. Now, there are objections you will run into. As a manager, there are many reasons why delegation is, quite frankly, very difficult, and you see some of them on this chart. I'm afraid to delegate because, one, my team doesn't know how to get the job done. Well, that's a big problem, because that means you really have reasons not to trust the people who report to you to do the job that you want to assign to them. What's the solution? Get them trained. Get them trained, create assessments, measure their performance. If they're still substandard, they're not able to complete the assigned tasks, increase their aptitude through more training, more rigor, hire the right people, etc., etc. But you can't just simply not delegate because you don't trust your people. People aren't fully competent. Number two, I'm afraid to delegate because I like controlling as many things as possible. Does that sound familiar? I've worked for people like that. I'm sure that some of us in this class have as well. The solution? Recognize that trying to accomplish everything yourself while your team does nothing only sets you up for burnout and failure. As you begin to relinquish control, you will come to trust your team more as you watch your team members succeed. This is not easy stuff. It's easy to print a solution like that on a chart from a textbook. It's much harder to deal with actual insecure managers who have resorted to a lifestyle of controlling all things possible in order to ensure some measure of what they perceive to be performance and success. It's much harder to do that. Number three, I don't want anyone on my team outperforming me. Well, the solution that the textbook gives us, high-performing team members are a reflection of your success as a manager. Encourage them to excel, praise them for it, share the success of your team with the rest of the organization. Now, like the one above it, it's easy to print that in a chart like this in the textbook. But when you read that problem, I don't want anyone on my team outperforming me, you can smell the insecurity from here. I can. It doesn't smell good. It smells like something bad in the refrigerator. That's the smell of managerial insecurity. That's a difficult thing to deal with, and it won't be dealt with quickly either. This is something that needs to be sussed out with that manager. Is there a valid reason why they're that insecure? Is it because the last person whose team didn't perform that they were demoted or fired as a manager? Is it because there's a track record of poor performance? There's a lot of reasons for a manager to actually say something like, I don't want anyone on my team outperforming me. You have to get to the bottom of that before you can really create a solution. The last one, I don't know how to delegate tasks effectively. Well, that's why we had the slide right before that, right? If someone is working as a manager and really hasn't learned how to delegate tasks effectively, train them. They got to get trained. They got to understand how the process is supposed to work before they can begin to develop their aptitude in it. But if nothing else, this chart should illustrate to you there are very, very prevalent common reasons why managers sometimes aren't good at delegation at all. And these are some of the ways to look at some of the possible solutions. Now, there are various forms of authority in delegation that will work. And you can see some of them here. Line authority, authority that flows in a direct chain of command from the top of the company to the bottom. And we realize that's what's supposed to happen legitimately. That's why you have an org chart in the first place, right? If you work in the marketing department and the vice president of marketing comes by and says, hey, I'm going to assign you a task, and you say, wait a minute, why should you be able to tell me what to do? He should be able to look at you and say, well, it's because my business card says vice president of the department. That's why, because I have legitimate authority to have you do this task. Now, There's also, second, staff authority, authority based on expertise that usually involves counseling and advising line managers, right? It may be a form of authority. Why? Because demonstrably that manager has been with the company for 25 years and really does have the experience, knowledge, and expertise to comment intelligently on the matter at hand. Number 3, other staff members. There may be employees, advisors, and counselors who can help line departments in making decisions, but who don't actually have formal authority to make the final decisions. For instance, when, your department is making financial decisions, you may ask for guidance and an opinion from somebody in finance or someone in accounting. They don't have the authority to really sign off on the final decision, but you need their information and advice and will benefit from them being able to freely and transparently comment and give their opinion on particular aspects of the decision you're making. Let's keep going. Other forms of authority. Authority granted to committees or teams involved in a firm's daily operations. That's committee and team authority. And work team authority. Group of operating employees who are empowered to plan and organize their own work and perform their work with a minimum of supervision. If you have highly competent, highly qualified employees, many times that's the fastest way to get things done, is just give them the full authority to make all the necessary decisions. But you can see there's various different ways to handle the authority side of delegation. Depending upon the context and the environment of the work team and organization you're in, some of these may be more or less appropriate, but you see these in different organizations. We see some of that right here in this diagram from figure 6.4 from the textbook in this company, Clark Equipment, right? You can see that there are staff managers, for instance, in HR and engineering, who will be able to provide some commentary and guidance, as well as line managers in the respective product divisions. And then, of course, you have each of the departments below, from purchasing, fabrication, sales to distribution, which will have their own set of delegation procedures. Now, what does this really mean in the real world? In the real world, the key reason why we leverage the whole principle of delegation is actually very, very straightforward. And that is simply that one man cannot do everything. One woman cannot do everything. This is why you have employees in the first place, to exponentially multiply your efforts, your company's efforts, because one person can't do all things effectively and efficiently. This is why a two-person company is more than double the effectiveness as a one-person company, and why a 10-person company will be far more than 10 times as effective as a one-person company. The whole principle of being able to multiply your efforts together through collaboration, specialization, and the delegation of authority and tasks. This is indeed the very principle, quite frankly, that keeps many small businesses from ever really thriving and flourishing, because of owners and managers who cannot effectively delegate to their employees. Maybe they just don't trust them. Maybe they're not doing a good job hiring competent employees. Or maybe they're just afraid of someone ever flourishing to the point where they're better at certain tasks than the original founder was. For whatever set of reasons, many things hold us back from being really effective in delegation, and that in turn holds businesses back from becoming the business they very well could be if they were able to effectively and efficiently delegate authority and tasks to other employees. I hope that helps. We'll see you in the next lecture.